Business Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today is a special episode. It's a part of a series with Morton Fine Art. My next guest is an artist and educator currently based in Washington, D.C. Please welcome Michael Booker.
Hi, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
This is going to be great. I mean, I find your work to be very, very interesting. It's very meticulous, I would imagine. Yeah. I was like, oh my God! I was like, how are you doing this? So, if for the fine folks out there that are the listeners and all, could you describe your work and how do you put yourself into your work? Like, how do you really Because as I find people are saying, like the Dorian Gray quote, there's a lot of me in this painting. Mm-hmm. So how do you put yourself and what matters to you into your work?
Yeah, well, first of all, I primarily draw using fine line or pens. Mm-hmm. And so with the techniques that I use, a lot of it goes back to the ideas in quilt making. Actually, my mother quilted, my grandmother quilted, and I started to go back and look at the histories and some of the things that's been lost over time with quilt making. And a lot of the ideas and the concepts and the symbolism, and I've been kind of thinking about those things and extracting it into my own work. And so when I think about how I use those ideas of quilt making and then also incorporating myself into it, I do a lot of figurative work, and there's usually a lot of family and friends and other people in it, but there's a certain emotional resonance and I'm trying to get with all of them.
Sure.
And that emotion comes from me. I feel like the people in my work, they're there just to express my own emotions.
Sure.
So instead of using my own face, which I don't like to do as much, I use everybody else to kind of show what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I dig it. So for the fine folks out there, tell them where you're from, because I was like, we can't ignore. It's like you got the powerful accent, my guy.
I'm originally from Mississippi, born and raised. I moved to Maryland to come to grad school.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Mississippi.
That's great. That's great. When I first started doing the research, I was like, Michael's a doppelganger. I was like, he's like the Mississippi version of me. I was like, if those, that it's this thing that's on Instagram when it shows the faces you turn into. I was like, if I do it and I see this guy, I'll be really mad. So, tell me about your chosen techniques. Like, why the pens and in some of the other techniques that you're using, and how really do you use them? What does that process look like ultimately is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so it took a while to get to these pens and where I'm at now. I thought I was supposed to be a painter, and I was painting for a long time. And that's because that's what I learned in school, and it was following the artists that I liked and things like that. And then I realized this was back in 2017. I remember this day really clearly, and I've told this story a few times. But this was when the snow apocalypse happened.
Yes, I remember.
It was March of spring break. And this is when people were stuck on 295 for 10 hours or whatever. And I remember being really unhappy with my paintings at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was stuck in a house, couldn't go nowhere, couldn't go to the studio, couldn't do anything. All I had around me was paper and pen. Yeah. And so I just started drawing, and it was something I kind of been thinking about for a while. But it's that day I kind of started to draw with pen and kind of never looked back from there. When I was painting, I always felt like I was trying to compare myself to all these other figures in art history. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't making paintings for myself. Mm-hmm. And so when I switched to pen, something kind of opened up for me. And I feel like I was finally making work for myself instead of trying to fit myself into this art historical canon. Yeah. And so the development of this process, working with pens, it took a long time to even get to the point where I was comfortable showing that work. For the first year of using those pens, all that work is nobody will ever see. And the development of it is a lot of thinking about color theory, but also the marks that it makes. Mm-hmm. Going back to the ideas of quilt making, I look at that mark as thread, or how different pieces are sewn together. Yeah. And so some of the patterns and some of the things, some of the ideas of G's Benz quilt makers and some of the lost histories from quilt making, all goes back into the pen. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, during the Underground Railroad, quilts were used to send messages. Yeah. And so, one pattern in a quilt would tell the slaves, you got to make sure you find a change of clothes because you got to blend in here. Right. Another pattern, the safe house pattern, will tell you there's a safe house up ahead. You can stay here and rest. And so I remember talking about this with this one lady, and she told me that none of this had happened. And I remember distinctly, she was so adamant about it. And I remember distinctly kind of arguing with her a little bit, and the reason why she said it was she was like, it's not written down anywhere. Like there's no evidence of it. Yeah. And the reason why it wasn't written down anywhere because we weren't allowed to read or write like back then, and also we were trying to hide it from you, like as well. So
we put a quote together saying, "This is what we're doing." It's like what? Like I can tell what you're doing now.
and that idea of like this lost history and how things kind of change over time and how stories are told over time, all kind of filtered back into the things I think about with working with the pen.
That notion of uncovering like what's there and what maybe has gotten lost, that's very important to me as well. And doing like this project, doing this type of work, because it's like people don't always know what's being said, what the art is about, what the work is about, unless they're hearing it from the person that's doing it, and like really what goes into it. So it's like, oh well, this is what I believe Michael's work is about. It's like, well, he just told you what it's about, so you should probably listen to what he said.
Yeah, but at the same time, like we also have to bring our own ideas into it as well. Like we can't control all of the narrative. Sure. Like 99% of the work we see when we're scrolling through Instagram or whatever, like people just look at it and like click the like button and keep going or whatever, but they don't. All those ideas you have is only a certain amount of people will ever even try to reach out to even think about it.
True. This is true. So now we're going to go back in time a little bit. I read that your path might have been to become an engineer. So can you tell me what brought about that change and that move toward fine art? And before you get into it, I think we have a similar story about maybe engineering wasn't the jam.
No, it wasn't. So my dream job growing up, I wanted to build roller coasters. Yeah. That was the thing that I wanted to do. I used to play this video game like all the time growing up, Roller Coaster Tycoon. I used to love that game. And I wanted to build roller coasters. That's what I thought I wanted to do. But that was when I was a kid. Yeah. As I got older, like went to college, I went to Mississippi State, and that's a school where it's known for engineering program. But also like my mother went there, my father went there, my sister went there, uncles, aunts, like all my family all went there. Yeah. And so my first year, like I picked engineering, but it was because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so I didn't do too well like my first year, and I changed to art. And then I remember changing to art. You have to submit a portfolio after like 2 years or whatever to get into the official art program at the school. I failed. I didn't get in twice. I submitted my portfolio once, didn't get in. Submitted again the next semester, didn't get in again, and then I had to change to just this painting program that they had there. And I ended up, graduating there. And then when I finished college, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Sure. And the only reason I actually applied and went to grad school was A, because I didn't know what to do in my life, and B, I wanted to get out of Mississippi. I needed to find a way to leave. And so like fortunately enough, I was able to, get accepted to where I am now. Get accepted to University of Maryland. And it wasn't until I was in grad school, which I actually even considered like art as like something for me. Yeah. I think I was just kind of coasting the whole time. So even going further back, were you a person that doodled? Like you would draw? Yeah, I did. I used to draw like little video game characters and stuff like that. I remember in high school, senior year, I designed like the class senior t-shirt. Nice. But they didn't give me one for free, so I never got one. I was mad. Like I was like, "How design this for you? You don't want to like? I can't even get a T-shirt for myself, so I don't even have one." That was your indoctrination into the art world. It's like, look, you're gonna be doing this, but when it comes to that money, bro, sorry. Yeah, exactly. I was a very enterprising young man. I would draw. I had the whole thing where I didn't make it into the School of the Arts. They were like, yeah, we don't really think your work is that good. So something you want to tell a 13-year-old. But I remember when I was in like elementary school, middle school, and that kind of timeline, I used to draw like the X-Men, and I would sell them for $0.25. So it's like, yo, you want that Wolverine? I got you, bro. And I'm sitting there like drawing Wolverine, and it was just the same one over and over again. Yeah. I mean, after the teacher saw it, I was like, you made like $5 in quarters. So you just see kids, the whole class is coming, I want my Wolverine like right now. I was like, I'm not coloring these though, just letting you know. And it was just kind of one of those things. And so I always kind of, when I would do something, I still do it now. If I'm in a meeting or something, I find myself drawing. I find myself sketching something, and it's just something that's just, you're kind of not mindlessly, but it's not like towards a certain goal. It's just like I'm just drawing something that comes to mind. And that's the beauty of drawing. Like it's instinctive, like it's intuitive, and it starts to reveal things about us that we don't know. I always like to, and I say this to my students, like when we look at a blank piece of paper, you're not really looking at a piece of paper, you're looking at a mirror, because it's reflecting like your thoughts. It's reflecting the possibilities of what could be, and it's also reflecting back the possibility of failure, like as well. Like it's opportunity and it's torment, like at the same time. Like it's so wonderful to kind of experience what we can do when we're by ourselves just drawing, like not talking to anybody else, but it reveals so much about us. And it's something I've kind of been like thinking about a lot, like as I'm working on, like when I'm working is becomes therapy, it becomes prayer, it becomes torment, it becomes this masochistic like thing you have to like figure out and work through.
I joke with people that my relationship with podcasting is my longest and most stable relationship, and might be the most abusive one too. You know, because like that masochistic thing is just like, man, nobody's listening, no one cares. I thought my work was good. So recently, I read that creativity is now as important as literacy when it comes to education. You're in a unique spot as an artist and an educator. How has creativity served you in education? Like, what comes to mind for me immediately is like problem solving, right? I think you have to have a degree of creativity, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, exactly. So we talk about STEM, like in education, and instead of STEAM, like trying to get that A for art, like it's in there. And so like I teach a lot of people who are not majoring in art, like as well. They're majoring in nursing, they're majoring in business, they're majoring in anything else. So like one of my goals is to try to instill in them the values and things you can learn like from my class when you go out into the world. And so things like creative problem solving and observational skills. That's why you see companies hiring like more artists to solve problems for them instead of the traditional way of doing it. Like let's get somebody on the outside who sees this a totally different way. How can you make something out of nothing? How can you see this in a unique way that other people are not seeing it? And so like creativity, like everybody has seen, like if I tell you to draw an apple, like everybody has seen an apple, but it's gonna be that one person who's gonna show you that apple like a way you've never seen it before. And it's interesting to kind of like think about that in a relationship to like business, or like how people are shaking and moving like now, like finding their ways to make money through whatever venue that's not reliant on the bigger company, like to help them out. Like they're doing it on their own. Like you got to be creative and to find different ways for yourself to make money for yourself, especially when you're more non-traditional in your job, where it's not like a 9-to-5 that you have.
So like my trajectory was really interested in art. I wanted to be a comic book like artist and write. I wanted to do everything in comic book. I wanted to ink, pen, draw, write the whole thing. And later, I just remember my parents kind of gave me that shift of you need to look at business. You might want to look at that. And it's not an indictment of saying you're not good or what have you, but they were like, I don't know if you're going to make money in that area. So really returning back to doing something that's creative, like outside of this podcast, I do movie curations. Outside of that, I write a comic. So it's like, and that's like kind of backwards going into the thing that I like, but I think having that foundational skill of knowing some of the ins and outs of business, right, and entrepreneurship, that made me better at having that foundation for this side of things and being a creator. And I wanted to touch on those transferable skills, right, where I remember when I got started in my marketing job in business, I just remember they were hiring a lot of people with psychology backgrounds in marketing, and you would think like, why don't you hire someone with a marketing degree? It's like, no, we're bringing in someone because we want to see how people think. We want to be able to sell them on things. So I think having that notion of bringing in artists to understand like problem solving, to understand how to achieve a certain goal, you're going to see more of that. I think the crossover element of you like working and educating a lot of people who are in different fields, it's always overlap. So tell me about a piece of your work that holds a particularly fond memory for you, and why? Like what comes to mind?
There's two things that like immediately come to mind. And both of them like are pieces that I made with my mother. Back in, I think it was 2016. Like every year I usually go home like for the holidays and like Christmas holidays and things. So back in 2016, I had my mother help me going back home make this piece where I took like these doilies and like I was trying to like think about, at the time I was thinking about like artifacts and again like how things are lost over time and like relics is kind of like remains now. And so like I was trying to think about what can I consider an artifact that existed throughout just my lifetime. And I think about like the doily as like this thing I used to see all the time in my grandmother's house growing up and everything, but it's something that's not as prevalent now. And so I took these doilies and I sewed them together in the shape of undershirt, a tank top, which is otherwise known as a wife beater, like excuse the term. And then I wore it, and this was to help my mother like to make it, and so she helped me make it, and then I wore it and did a painting like of me wearing it, and so it's like it's that piece, and then another piece where this was holidays of 2018, where I went home again, and over the course of 5 days, she and I made a quilt together, and this was my first time making like a full size like quilt, like the real deal, and I worked hard on that quilt like than any drawing that I've ever made. Like it's I didn't understand like how much labor is involved in making a quilt. It's a lot, and so like those experiences, like I got to like share those with her. Like those are the things I kind of really look back on, because the works, like you make them, if you're fortunate enough, someone buys them and then like they're gone. But like those two pieces, like I still have like those, and those things I won't sell, like they're always going to be with me, and they help me like just do something with her, especially now that we live, like she's still in Mississippi, I'm up here in Maryland. It was something that we can like do together.
That's great. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to work with your people, work with your family. It's like work with your mom. Like I found out like in doing a live show that my dad was a fan of the podcast. I didn't think he'd listen. He's ex-Marine. He's just like, I don't know, this art stuff. And I do a movie review pod, and I just kind of mentioned it to him. I was like, you want to be on it? He's like, yeah, I want to be on it. He's trying to be cool about it. He was so nervous. It was so funny. And the episode didn't get all the downloads I thought it would get, but it holds a really special place for me because I'm doing something, I'm sharing what I'm doing with my dad, and he's contributing to what my practice is, what my art is. And we did a review on, we're probably very close to the same age, so you might remember this one, the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie called Double Impact.
Oh, my dad, like, those are my dad's movies. Those action movies, those cheesy action, those are Steven Stallone, Seagal, Van Damme, all of those are all my dad's movies. I
just remember just him, he's like, yeah, man, it's like two brothers, double the Van Damme. I was like, what are we talking about? It's like, what are we saying here? So I got a couple more real questions for you before I get to those rapid fire ones. Describe the experience working with art and embassies.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to have a piece submitted to them to be on loan for them for 3 years in New York. And they reached out asking for a particular piece, and they were reaching out in terms of what can we do to connect with some of the things they were working on, their own ideas in terms of working with refugees. And so like there are some pieces that I had made like a little bit ago where I was thinking about like these people on a journey. Whereas and a lot of this connects back to hip hop like as well, but these people that's on a journey, if they're trying to get to where they're trying to go, I want to think about their journey as not like a physical place from point A to B, but more so like a state of mind in terms of trying to empower and embetter themselves. And that kind of comes back to like, this is an old Goody Mob song. They called Live at the Omni, and in some parts of it I kind of interpret it as it's kind of like what I'm saying. They're talking about like, how do we, if you put all the black people together, to think, especially the ones you think are more negative connotations associated with them. Like what if they kind of came together and created like this self-sufficient community? And like what would that look like? And like how do they build together? And so I kind of thought about this idea of like embetterment and empowerment, like for us and like these people trying to get to that better place. Not necessarily like, again, like in a specific location, but like how do we all come together spiritually or in our thoughts and in our ideas with our monies and things like that. And so they want to take some work that I did then to kind of connect with the idea of these refugees trying to move over and come to a better place and also empower themselves, even though if they've been dislocated from where they are as well. So it was a really good experience, and it was a really good time talking to them about it as well.
Get your work out there. I love it. So I'm going to flip these. What would you say are the best and most challenging aspects of your work, your practice, going about it? Like, tell me about it.
Well, like I mentioned a little bit before, but I feel like drawing, it's it becomes like thought. It becomes like this deep thought you kind of escape into, where you kind of forget about like what color I need to put here, what color I need to put there. But it's more about, how do I reconcile with what's going on in my life today? Yep. How do I like deal with these things, and how do I have this calm space to escape to, that I can just deal with it, and I can struggle through it as well. Like it's a blessing and a curse, because like I said, it's prayer and it's therapy at times, but it's also like there's this intense struggle that you put yourself through, that it's like, I feel like if I don't struggle like making a piece, like the piece will never be good enough. Like this is not good. Like I feel like I have to like hate the piece for a long time before I kind of like make my way through the other side and figure out where it goes. Yeah. And so like this like searching process that drawing does is, I think that's one of the best things about it, but it's also one of the most strenuous things as well. Like I wish I could make it much easier on myself. And there's some things I'm trying to do to make it easier on myself. Like everything doesn't have to be like a masterpiece. And I think there's some things I was trying to do, like every single piece I make, it has to be like the best thing ever. And it's like sometimes you gotta just do and just let it be and just let go. And so like this idea of drawing being a service to us, a service to you, and a service like for your thoughts and your minds in a way that other things can't be for me. Like, you know, some people can sing, some people can you know, play sports and escape, some people can do like a lot of other things. Drawing becomes that thing, it becomes that sanctuary. Yeah. It becomes that just escape for you.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that when you were just talking about basically being a perfectionist around something, and early on in doing my series of podcasts and this journey and this being my practice, I would look at like, man, I need to really get all those ums out of there. I need to get all those gaps out of there, and kind of hating it, because pretty much if you do, let's say, an hour worth of content, you're going to do like 2 hours worth of review. You're going to do a couple passes. Yeah. So now I think it's made me better at being an interviewer, at least I think, in that I'm trying to keep the conversation as authentic and normal as possible. And that comes from listening to those edited ones where all of those things cut out. It would sound choppy, and it's like, this is not a conversation. Yeah. This is just questions being answered with minimal space. Yeah. And it's just like, this is terrible, actually.
Yeah. And that authenticity is important. Like going back to like quilt making, like the ones that I like, I was mentioning G's being, but they don't have like perfect 90-degree angles and perfectly shaped like pieces. It's all like hand cut, handmade, and you can see those imperfections in it. And that imperfections, that kind of reveals the soul a little bit. Like you can't cut all that stuff out. Like we need to see that. And it's this and those other ideas about like imperfections, or like with their work and in other quilt making like practices, they would establish like a certain pattern within the quilt, but then they would find a way to break that pattern up, like disrupt it some way. And like that disruption becomes so important. Like in African American cultures, is that disruption is a way to ward off evil spirits. Like that's the same way as like putting newspaper up all over the walls, or like in quilts, like the disruption is thought of that evil spirits like to travel like in nice, clean, even straight lines. Yeah. And so you need a way to like ward them off, and that disruption becomes that. Those imperfections like become that. And it's like that's what we revel in, because that also goes back to creativity. That also goes back like to the soul. It goes back to what's inside as well.
Because we're imperfect people, we're imperfect creatures, what have you, and I think sometimes you run into something that's overly sanitized, overly manicured. Like, all right, where's the soul? Where's the real? And I remember talking with a curator about like how he appreciates and how he kind of sources work and things of that nature. And one of the things he said, he's like, yeah, you can get all the technical stuff, right? So understanding like how do lines work, understanding color, things of that nature. And he's like, what does it say though? Where's the soul of it though? And maybe those imperfections, maybe why you chose it, maybe seeing like brush strokes and things of that nature. And those are the things that kind of resonate for like a certain audience and so on. So this is the last real question I have for you. And you've touched on it, but I want you to really hammer this one home. What does your work reveal about your personality?
I think that, well, that's a good question. So I think that, like for me, especially like over the last 2 years, like we've all kind of been dealing with things, and we're all trying to find ways to cope with everything that's going on. Like from, the protests to COVID to Russia and Ukraine now to like everything that's going on. And it's like, we have to actually realize for ourselves that it's okay to not be okay. Yeah. But also like as black people and as a black man, it's like the idea of like being vulnerable with other people is like something you're not supposed to do. Like you always got to be strong. You always got to, hold your head high. You can't let nobody see any cracks in you. And I think that through my work and some of those emotions, like what I like to try to think about and reveal is that as I talked about that journey, we're on our way trying to get ourselves a little bit better. It's okay to feel bad that day. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to try to know that you don't have everything worked out like right now. And we see a lot of images of like black pain, and then we also on the other spectrum we see a lot of images of black joy. And both of those things are important. I think of what I'm more interested in thinking about and is that process of getting from one to the other. And leaning more toward on the optimist side. But it's still like we've been through a lot, but we're making our way over that hill, over that hump. And as I think about like how that relates to me is like I may not talk about these things with a lot of people. I may not, because I don't know like what they are. Like there's a lot of feelings that's inside, and I don't know how to verbalize them, but I know how to visualize them. And that's where the drawing kind of comes in and kind of reveals a lot of what I'm trying to get at, whether I'm succeeding or not. And I think that's why I keep doing it. It happens like with every piece I make, it's trying to like figure out these feelings and figure out what I'm thinking about. I'm a reserved person. I'm a little bit of an introverted person, but I think I speak loudest. This sounds a little bit too cheesy, but I think I speak loudest like through the art and through the work. So it's this pressure to try to be profound at all times, but we got to realize you don't have to always be that way. You can just be.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, it's time to get weird now. So with all of the goodwill that I've established with asking you meaningful, thoughtful questions, now I'm just going to ask you some weird questions.
Okay.
So these are rapid fire questions. I got 5 of them for you, and with them, we want to be as quick as possible, be as brief as possible, and because that's the nature, it's rapid fire, right?
Okay.
Now, unless you really need to say, look, I got to explain that one. You can do it, but try to keep your answers short. All right, first one, and I just thought this was funny. Is the pen mightier than the sword?
I'm supposed to be rapid fire.
Especially because you work with a pen.
Yeah, I got it. I get it. Like we see today, even what's going on today, information and the way information is spread can be much more deadlier and much more contagious than like any weapon. Yeah. So yeah, it'll definitely be the pen.
Okay, you're right. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given creatively?
Beware of early success. It's, you can get hot for a second, but what happens like 10 years from now, or, even, 3 months from like when you get hot. So definitely beware of early success.
I asked this earlier, so I'm going to ask you now. What's your favorite movie? I gave you about 40 minutes to figure it out.
I don't know.
Double impact.
I have no idea what my favorite movie would be. Like, I can name some movies, because I'm actually more of a TV show person than movies. Okay, I'll flip it. TV show. What's your favorite TV show? I can tell you what I'm watching now, what things I like right now.
Sure.
There's a show called Ozark on Netflix that's like pretty amazing, I think. God, when you're talking about going blank with these rapid fire questions, now it happens. Like everything is blank. I'm thinking back to like movies and stuff through my whole life and trying to like pinpoint on like one thing.
My pop culture life flashed before my eyes.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Ozark is cool. It's not my favorite show ever, but it's cool, and I enjoy it a lot. There's a lot of other great shows, a lot of other great movies too.
Yeah.
I always go back to movies like Love and Basketball. If I had to like go back to like a romantic comedy, a black rom-com, or something like that. But there's so many movies.
Classic Dennis Haysbert in that one. Being the abusive dad always.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to talk about color real quick, and I'm working this one in there.
Yeah.
For you, what is the most prominent color that you work with, and is there a representation as to why you use that color?
Yeah, so like with each piece, I always go in with like a certain idea of like I'm making a green piece, or I'm making a blue piece, or I'm making a red piece, etc. Like I always usually want one color to be the most dominant in there. But I find that within all of those pieces, and someone else pointed out to me, like there's these orange and this purple that I kind of use a lot because I feel like, especially when drawing like black people, like we have a lot of color within our skin other than just brown.
Yeah.
And so like those is an orange and a purple that I end up using a lot because they work so well together, them being secondary colors, but they highlight and they can give a little bit of warmth and also can give us a little bit of tone and a little bit of shadowing in there too. So those are two colors that kind of make their way into like everything like that I do.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. This is a little trolly, but I had to ask it. Favorite roller coaster?
So I can answer this. Okay. So growing up, there used to be these shows. They used to come on TLC. Yeah. Back when TLC was actually about learning, not reality shows, but they used to highlight different theme parks and roller coasters and things. And so I had some family, some cousins that lived in Ohio, and like Cedar Point is in Ohio. And there's some other in Kings Park, I think Kings Dominion, I think that's the name of it. But they had a roller coaster come out. They had one called the Beast, which is a wooden roller coaster. But then they came out with the Son of Beast. And so like the Son of Beast was the first wooden roller coaster that had a loop in it. Yeah. And like I remember like going to visit my cousins that summer and it's like I have to go. Like I gotta go ride this thing. And so like I did. And so like I remember that and I love that like experience and just like what I used to learn about them and the feeling of roller coaster. I don't know why I did, but I did. Like it just gave me something.
Well, that's great. So we can wrap up there. I want to thank you for being on this podcast, and I want to invite you and encourage you to tell the listeners where to check out your work. Obviously, Morton Fine Art is a thing, but check out your work and all of that good stuff, and where to follow you on social media.
Yeah. So thank you for having me as well. You can find me on Instagram at @MABooker_art. And my website, michael-booker.com. And I'm also like represented by Morton Fine Art, as you said as well, so you can find me there too.
So there you have it, folks. I want to thank Michael Booker for coming on to the podcast, and I am saying that there is art in and around your city. You just got to look for it.